Oh, yeah. Like light out there.
Yep, pretty sweet, huh? Wonder who drove that. Can't be bothered to walk anymore.
He's coming back from Miami, so my guess is good. 5 to 10 minutes.
Okay, well, we'll get going and then add him in. Okay, so got the machines running. All right, thanks everybody for being here. We'll call our town council work session into order for the 14th of April. Looks like it's 4:01 PM. We'll do a quick roll call starting over here.
Brent Horsby. Spencer Wade.
Josh Ewan.
Jennifer Davila. Erin Nelson serving as town manager.
William Collins, administrative director.
All right,
Yeah, well, Michael Havigan, C Roads manager.
thanks, Michael. We heard that Gary will probably be joining us in a few minutes, so we'll have him jump in when he gets here. Thanks everyone for being here. Fun little agenda. Maybe it doesn't sound fun by technical definition, but we do have a good agenda tonight. We are going to start with reviewing comments from the public hearing on the proposed amendments to the budget and master fee schedule, which last I heard, we didn't have any other than Linda's the other night. Did we get any?
I did not see any. I kind of flew through the office email today, but I don't think we have received any thus far, but people do have until Friday, April 17th at 5 PM to send stuff in. So
Good deal.
Yeah.
So if you're listening and you want to make a comment on the amended budget for this fiscal year or the amended fee schedule, do get that in by Friday. We'd love to hear from you if you have ideas on that. And just as a reminder for us, refresh my memory, we're going to vote on the amended budget and fee schedule at our next meeting, so a week from today, right?
yeah,
That's our plan.
yes, correct. 'Cause we've already got, yes, that's correct, assuming there's no other major changes.
Yeah.
Yep, you got it.
Okay. So process wise, hopefully we'll have our budget amended by then. So tonight is kind of tonight this afternoon is our first like real foray into the fiscal 27 budget. So the budget that'll start July 1st, first discussion. Quite a bit to get through in terms of that, but we're going to start with talking roads with Michael on a couple of projects. And then that way, Michael, you feel free to take off or feel free to hang around for the rest of the discussion that way we put you on the agenda first. You don't need to wait through it all. You've got other things you need to do. So I think what we're gonna have you kind of talking about is some fiscal 27 budget ideas and comments requests, and then also an update or report out on the biolytics product.
Yeah. So, Biolytics, I can do the bogey first.
I can bring up whatever you prefer. I can bring up either.
So can you start with what the heck or who the heck is Biolytics for those that are there?
Biolytics, the town hired Johnson DeMille, and Biolytics is a program that is AI assisted. So engineers drove all the roads in town, and they evaluated them, and then they put an estimate, a time phasing, and a cost estimate, including quantities, et cetera, and a description of what needs to be done with each road.
So kind of a technology tool to help us figure out what shape our roads are in and what it would cost to fix them up.
Exactly, with a phasing, a 10-year plan.
Okay.
And so, we're looking up there on the screen now is the raw data. And, it breaks down every street, talks about the treatment and the quantity, the planned year, when it should be done, and, the cost, the estimated cost. So if you wanna pick a street, let's say we pick Fifth Street East between the highway and Black Locust, that's, unfortunately, they're not numbered, but,
You found it. First one came up.
and if you look at it, you go across, it's 12,223 square foot. 24-foot wide roadway. It's 459 feet long. And 509 feet long, and they give you an estimate of 22,273. And this is to be done in 2030.
So Michael, when it says, by 2030, are they basically giving us a sense that like, if you don't do it by then, you're gonna get yourself in trouble or getting behind on maintenance, or what's the,
No, I don't think there's a downside, I chose that street particularly because I have it in the budget for 2027. And, there isn't a downside, it's just, generally speaking, one can say that, all the roads, 15, 16 miles of C roads in town need to be fixed up. Essentially. Yeah, if you drive around, you see what kind of condition they're in. So the idea here was just to have, to give a heads up to the town in terms of budgets and, what to expect and to use it as a goal, really, to put together projects to improve the streets.
so
Very common.
break it to us. What's the bottom line, big old number if we were to do it all?
Only 3.8 million.
Oh,
That's it.
3.8 million. Actually, it's like
Overall.
crazy, but yeah, I was gonna guess higher. I should have done the town council, who can guess the number, but
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah, that's all. So, the way I'm going to approach it in terms of a plan is to put together segments. Just take East Bluff or West Bluff and take a section and put that together as a project. And, and go to the county transportation board and try to get a 50. And that's right now, because I don't see anywhere where there's any kind of funding available, big time funding like that, well, big time to us, funding like that available
Yeah,
right now.
cool. Good to see you, Gary. We'll the record, we got everybody here now.
4:08 PM.
Okay, that's helpful background. Good to see AI actually being maybe used for good every once in a while. So how about budget for next year? What are you thinking?
A budget for next year, I have a budget of $221,488. And it includes Fifth Street East, the street I just talked about. Because that's heavy traffic, just lots and lots of automobiles use that street. So I had that in the budget. Bluff Bench Road, to fix that road, I figure $8,000 a day, 10-hour day, 4 days with the county. Roads Department, $32,000. And then general maintenance, road patching, 8,000, crack sealing, 7,000. Road grading is 20,000. And the reason for that is, from my experience, unless, generally if you have the county do it, they just send a grader. There's no water truck or no roller. So, and it never turns out, it has never turned out well, And so, I'm looking to, to hire a contractor. That's my thinking on that. I mean, if we just hired the county, it would probably be half that. So,
But it would just be grading and it wouldn't be,
I'm sorry.
it would just be grading
It
if we
would
hired
just
the
be a
county.
grader going through. We'd see.
Yeah, my experience and, I think we talked about it last week when Gary was gone, but it's such a huge difference to grade when it's wet versus to grade when it's dry,
Right.
and then to roll it flat. It
Right.
feels like it makes a lot more of a difference versus you can grade and you still have all the washboards.
Yeah, you have, and then you have wind, the way they do it, you have wind, the gravel piles up on the side, they're called windrows.
Yeah.
And so the gravel isn't getting totally across the surface of the roadway. And then the other thing I have is culvert clean, the culverts are clogged all around town. And Steve Hedgelson is the contractor to do that. And I have $5,000 in for that.
For culvert.
Yeah, culvert clean. And then the improvements would be over in West Bluff, Sagebrush and South, all those gravel streets over there. I have a hard number from Simon Gregor, 24,488, to do to those streets what you see over here with the recycled asphalt. Hopefully the recycled asphalt works out, everything, by the end of the summer we'll know. And then the chip sealing would be over here, Mulberry, Fourth East, Third East, and Black Locust between Third and Fourth Street. And that's a $74,000 number. And then Fifth Street East is the one we talked about earlier, 22,000. And after that is my salary, 12,000, engineering services, 15,000, and equipment purchase, 2,000, which would be up, what I'm thinking about. And of course, this is a very preliminary budget and it's up for discussion,
Sure.
Yeah, and is a box grader. And what that'll enable us to do, if I can find the right type of equipment. So they range from $1,000 to $2,000. It'll enable the town to have somebody like Steve Hagelson or something to attach this piece of equipment and, if we have washboarding somewhere or something like that to fix that.
Kind of do our own maintenance on the fly, kind of.
Yeah, right now the road department owns nothing. Yeah. And so it would be its first asset.
Yeah. You're not calling yourself an asset? Come on, man. It's helpful. I wonder, I'd just encourage maybe a little bit of discussion with the council. I don't really, how to think about, what we should prioritize in terms of maintenance or not. I kind of lean on Michael to advise us on that. But does anybody have reactions to what Michael's sharing with us or thoughts on prioritization, things you've heard from the community of things that ought to be priorities?
When you're talking about Fifth East, is it the whole entire segment from the highway up to Mulberry, or is it
Just Black Locust.
just a Black Locust?
Yeah, and the
Okay.
problem over there is drainage.
Right.
So
Right,
it may go, that number I have there may go higher. Because we may have to put a culvert in onto the ramp to the post office, because so, and that, we'd have to bring the engineer down, do an evaluation and all that. So, it could be another 6,000.
right. I agree with Fifth East. I also think that we should look pretty closely at Third East. Those seem to be pretty high traffic roads to me.
Third East, yeah, and look at chips area.
Yeah, but especially down by
Yeah, that's another.
the turquoise where there's,
Yeah.
road damage down there. I I mean, I unfortunately don't get to drive around on the west side as much as I do the east side, so I'm not as. Nothing on the west side pops out in my head the way that those two do in particular. And of course, Black Locust, but I know Black Locust does a huge job and
Seventh
I like-
is also pretty rough.
So Black Locust, that 1.1 million, we originally, the 1.1 million I'm looking for, to fund the resurfacing of Black Locust. Navajo Twins 7, that's included in that 3.8.
Yeah,
So that,
yeah.
so if I got that, if we got that funding, it would reduce that 3.8.
and that's where Seventh comes in.
Yeah,
That's
Black Locust is,
Navajo Twins Navajo Twins clear down to here is all really Black Locust in my opinion.
Through the Sea Roads rules. I just throw this out here, the town can issue bonds to do the road work.
Yeah, so just to clarify, Aaron, you can help me with this, the way we'd work it in the budget process is we're gonna put a number in there, and there's nothing that says it has to be used for sagebrush on this blah, 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 right? Like, those are things that we can decide through the road. We're not dedicating, like, that's the way he's got this broken out, 20,000 for road grading. That's not a hard number. The
No.
big number is the hard number.
Yeah, so, let me bring up this. So in roads, I would advise that like the roads manager does, provide suggestions as to, hey, this is the total overall dollar amount. But what like we're going to send up and approve would be kind of like that higher number. I will advise, we do not have $221,000 in projected revenue, so we'll already need to like dial it back a little bit. But I think that is a discussion with council, like, hey, here are some of the priorities, and then within the financial constraints, provide direction. But we know we don't have to break out like what roads are being done. I think that's more just like transparency for the public, but it matters less to the budget as to those individual. We'd want kind of high level, like, this is maintenance, this is improvements, this is salary, and these are professional services, kind of those bigger buckets.
So on the overall budget, and it seems to me there's like three basic sources of revenue. There's the Class C road funds that come from the gas tax.
Mhm.
There's a potential county match, which is not a guaranteed thing, but we got matched this year.
Yeah, we got a match this year.
And then and we could use general funds, but let's put that aside for now. And then we could use some capital improvement funds, which we're gonna talk about later. What is the projected Class C revenue? What do we have in our budget for Class C?
So the projected revenue for next year, including rollover from this year, everything that you just mentioned, as well as interest earned on current holdings, would be $196,400. So roughly $25,000 short of Michael's projections.
But that is assuming is a wrong word, hoping that we would get a 50% match from the county.
So Michael was able to secure $83,000 in match from the county. I'm projecting roughly 80,000 in the Class C road allotment. And then there is a rollover from this fiscal year of about $30,000 to $31,000. And then a few bucks in interest.
So if we wanted to do everything that Michael's proposing here, we would need to pull some from capital projects. Or see what happens next year, see if we can get more money from the county or something.
Yeah, in a standard year, you could also pull from the general fund, like there's nothing that prevents you from using the general fund.
Sure.
For this year, we'll get into all of that.
Yeah.
But yes, this year, based on kind of the high level of where we're starting at, we would want to pull from capital projects. Because we're just shy of our balance in the general fund as well.
Gotcha, okay. That, and helpful context for everything we're about to talk about is like kind of your wish list, we've got that, we're a little bit short of the revenue.
This is a wish list.
Yeah.
Exactly, for
Oh, and with that match, or and with the rollover funds, we're not too far from that.
Yeah, 25,000 is
Yeah,
not bad for hitting most of the wish lists, so.
Yeah, so if we wanted to grab 25 out of capital improvement, like we're gonna talk about later, would seem like a totally reasonable thing for us to do.
I just wanna say, some of these numbers are my estimate, you know, when you get odd numbers.
Sure.
Things could change, but,
Super helpful. Thank you, Michael.
oh, thank you.
yeah, thanks, Michael.
Feel free to stick around if you want, or if not, we'll see you soon. Okay, so that's kind of the roads piece of budget discussion. What we want to take you through is kind of the very, very first cut of discussion around budget for the fiscal 27. Admittedly, this is my first time doing this as mayor, first time for a couple of, or three of us going through the budget process. I just got my municipal budgeting 101 book last night. And I actually took a little bit of time to, I took a little time to skim it, you know, because this is the first time. Yeah, Brent and Jen are a little bit of old hats at this, by now. You know, I think this is a real valuable exercise for us. Obviously, one of the most important things that we do as a council. My friend Carrie Nakamura, who I used to work with when she was a Salt Lake County, and now she works for the Utah League of Cities and Towns. But her thing is that you can look at somebody's budget and tell what their values are. You know, your family budget, you know, you spend money on healthy food or you spend money on junk food, right? Or, you know, you look at the town budget and you can kind of see what the values are. Obviously, there's certain things in a town budget. We don't have a choice. We have to spend Class C money on roads. Like, you can't just go spend that on whatever we want. So there are some limitations. But this is our opportunity to think through the values of what's valuable to us as a town and make investments in it. So that's the exercise. What Aaron and I are kind of gonna bring forward to you today are some initial ideas. I'll very much call them straw proposal, what have you, but we wanted to have some ideas to bring forward, get feedback on. Of course, none of this is set in stone. This is our first conversation. So if you're in the public and you're hearing this, this is the very first, you know, shot of talking about this. With that said, I am gonna start off by just saying, one of the things we're gonna talk about today is a potential for a tax increase. Which is always are always difficult conversations. We've never had one in the history of the town of Bluff, in our very young history. But because we're bringing it up, doesn't mean we're gonna do it. If we do it, there's all sorts of process that we have to go through along the way in doing that. But we want to be super transparent early and often with our conversations so that if people are listening along, they're, opportunity not to be caught off guard. Don't want anybody on the council to get caught off guard. So this is very much a very first conversation in that regard. But because, property taxes are kind of such a big deal, we wanted to start the conversation with that, and then we can get into a lot of other conversations. So Aaron was kind enough to kind of create a little bit of a presentation we can walk through that we're going to kind of tag team. I think I'll just take the property tax one to start, just because it's one of those that can be a tricky conversation. We actually talked about it at the Utah League of Cities and Towns event last night, came up. And interestingly enough, when we reached out to the county just for some initial information, they have not gone through tuition taxation in a very long time. Like, it's not a process that they're familiar with. And I don't think that's a good thing, because I think that means that people are kicking the can down the road. And then when you do it, it's a really, big deal. So as a little bit of background, and property taxes are pretty complex, I consider myself at all to be an expert in it. Aaron and I are both learning a lot about it, and we all will future. But short version of the way I understand it is when we incorporate as a town, we set a very basic, quite low tax rate for the town of Bluff as in terms of property taxes. You know, it's an option not to have any property tax, but I think, the original town council was like, well, we're gonna have a small amount of property tax. But most of our revenue is gonna come in from other things, transit room tax, sales tax, other items. So they set a tax rate at the time to bring in about $30,000 a year. The way tax law in Utah works, my understanding, is that you set that amount that you're gonna collect. And even if your property tax values in your town go up, you still collect just that same amount. So it actually ends up being less per household, or less per dollar of value over time. But it's not gonna go up unless you say we're gonna make it go up. So what that means is we're still collecting that same $30,000, approximately $30,000 a year as we were 8 years ago. But as you all know, the value of $1 today is a lot less than it was 8 years ago. So if you don't raise your taxes at all, you're actually losing the value of that tax dollar over time. So of our overall budget, currently, we're only getting about $30,000 a year, which isn't a lot. I looked at my property tax bill, I pay something like $75 a year in property taxes to the town of Bluff. About the same amount I pay to the county library district, right? Very low amount of my overall bill. Now, my overall bill's $1,200. That's a big nut, but my property tax to the town of Bluff is like $70. That $70 that I pay contributes to that $30,000. So in talking it over and looking about it, it doesn't feel like a sustainable thing to just never raise that property tax. We'll just over time keep eroding the value of that property tax dollar. At the same time, we do have new opportunities and new challenges that we need to make. The state's coming down with unfunded mandates like the wilderness urban interface stuff that we now have to deal with. There are things that we need to invest in to keep up with the town. So my initial thought is that we do a property tax increase to bring in some more revenue to town. And we direct that to one of our core priorities that we talked about at the beginning of the year being public safety, emergency services. And the idea would be that if we increased property taxes to bring in an additional $50,000 a year, so it'd be a total of $83,000 a year, that would fund a part-time position to support emergency services. So it'd be an administrative position, but the person could do things like wilderness urban interface work, like checking for defensible face at people's houses and figuring out plans, organizing the events like the burn day event that we did, helping to do recruit new members for the fire department and EMS, things like that. And then continue to do some equipment and supplies for the fire and EMS, as well as it could be training as well. And maintenance and operational expenses. So that altogether would be, $55,000 that we would be putting toward emergency services, which would be an increase of something in the realm of $40,000 over what we have been investing. So that's kind of like of all the topics in the budget, I just figured to start with the headline of like kind of the biggest idea and maybe the most controversial, maybe not. Who knows? And in Bluff, if people are like, wow, yes, I'm happy to pay for emergency services. But we figured we'd start with that. And so I think maybe I'll ask Aaron what I'm missing in that overview, and then maybe we can have a bit of a discussion about that. And then we can go through a number of other kind of budget items that are, less large in size and less consequential in terms of process and so forth.
Yeah, I think that was a fantastic overview. Just a few notes for the public and for folks listening. So for primary residences, Utah automatically only taxes that property at 55% of the tax, like the valuable or the value, yeah, assessed value. So for primary residences, it's 55% of the total assessed price. And it was really helpful for me I watched a couple trainings on this, but to think of property taxes in Utah as revenue based as opposed to percentage based. Because if we think about it as the money that we're bringing in as a revenue line item, that's the piece that has not changed year to year. Whereas a lot of other places will do like a percentage base. So they're collecting the exact same percent from every person, and that's what they're increasing. When we go through, if we go through truth in taxation, there are multiple requirements from the state, so we can get into all those logistics. If you have questions, so you can come see me separately. In your agenda packet, I also linked some helpful trainings and webinars if you want to go out and do some digging on your own. But ultimately, we want to make sure that if you head down this path, that the public is informed early on. It does extend the budget season a little bit longer. But I think, just again, calling out what was on the slide, from 2021, the total aggregate assessed property values in Bluff specifically were about $25 million. That has grown to 60 million. So every single assessed dollar, we're now not recouping, but we get less and less and less and less and less from every single person. While the longer you go in that kind of system, at some point we are just gonna kind of have to rip off that Band-Aid, or you kind of say, oh, this is not a major line item in our budget. I do think it's important to also highlight, and I was not here in incorporation, and I appreciate you all taking me in and having me, but I wasn't here upon incorporation. I do understand the previous council, one of the things that was very important is they didn't want to raise taxes. However, I think it is important to realize is that we've actually, by not doing anything, have essentially decreased everyone's taxes by a significant amount for Bluff specific stuff, because everyone is contributing less and less to that total aggregate. And so while it's uncomfortable to talk about a tax increase, we can go through like a couple of scenarios if you're interested. But what we're proposing here, really only takes us just a little bit above, if we had been a percentage base as opposed to this revenue base, this just takes us a little bit above what we were collecting previously, if it was to be adjusted for inflation. I also want to note San Juan County, when they were collecting taxes for Bluff, they have a huge infrastructure with dozens of personnel. They've got all of these other things that, this is kind of a drop in the bucket for them. When we say, oh, we're not going to raise taxes, we have to look at the infrastructure that we're building and know that we have all of these assets and plans and projects that do require some kind of funding. And so, San Juan County might be able to capitalize on all of the other stuff they have going on. But you all need to be really intentional about the revenues that you have coming in. And so I really appreciated Josh's thoughts on, aligning this with your 2026 goals, specifically for emergency services. We know that's been a pain point for quite some time.
And one other thing, so it's difficult to get exact numbers at this stage. We'll need to work with the county if we go forward. But we ran some just preliminary numbers. And just to give you a sense, so that, I'm currently paying like $70 a year for my house. And if we were to do this tax increase, that $70 would be something like $160. So, it would be, percentage wise, that's a big increase. In terms of how much I would be paying to the town of Bluff, it wouldn't be a lot more. But it'd go from like 70 to 160. So folks' overall tax bills wouldn't change dramatically. And we would, under the new laws that passed this year, we would have to tell people, your Bluff tax would go from this to this, your overall tax bill would go from this to this. It would give people the sense of that. And we're actually supposed to do that in May. Best practice of doing that in May if we were to move forward on that. So people would hear about this and learn about this quite early in the process and get a sense of those numbers. But those are rough that's just a rough sense of like how it would, change over time. So in my house, 70 to something like 160, so take my overall property tax bill from like, 1,300 to just over 1,400 or something like that. Just give you a sense of the overall. So that's a lot to throw at you guys on that, but we've never had that conversation as a town before, so I figured we'd start there. What questions or thoughts or ideas yet?
How does the truth and taxation process work?
It's a flow chart.
Yeah, it is. So we really do have to work with San Juan County and the assessor's office as well as the clerk's office to identify the amounts. One of the things that we need to do is we have to provide based off of an average home value and then a comparable like commercial property value. We have to provide a template that says, if your house is this average value, this is what it would be if this didn't get approved, and this would be if, you all voted yes. It moves budget season. Typically, the budgets are wrapped up and fully approved by like mid-June, June 22nd at the very latest. What you all would do is you would still adopt, I don't know what they call it. But it's like a preliminary budget that you kind of work off of until everything is fully approved in August. We have to have a full public hearing on the budget during our regular time, and then there is a separate public hearing just on truth and taxation and the certified tax rate in August. It can't be scheduled the same day as any other meeting. It can't be any of our meetings, any of the planning and zoning meetings, and it can't be with any other taxing entity in San Juan County where we might have a conflict. So if San Juan School District was to hold a public hearing about their tax rate, we can't have it on the same day or the same night. So there is some coordination there. But yeah, overall, as Josh mentioned, San Juan County, when I called, they had indicated that they had not gone through this process. They said, you might reach out to Grand County. But I think between now is also a good time to do it because as Josh said, in legislature, there's new stuff coming down the pipeline next year that's a little bit more stringent. We can follow that as like a best practices and still align under this year's regulations. A lot of it is just like making sure all the notices are like right on point. However, if you all approve the increase, it's my understanding like this doesn't go like on the ballot or anything. It's just you have to follow the entire process. Everything has to check out, and then the state auditor's office would go in and make sure we follow everything, and they say, yep, everything looks good, you all voted, blah, 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 it's good, it goes into effect, and then that information gets fed back to the county so they can get the final tax notices out for the November payments.
Well, I mean, it's not an easy process, but it is one that you've got to figure out. I think, there's a real value to it because it creates transparency for the public. But they told us last night at the League of Cities and Towns, and there was a training that I went to earlier, and they basically, there was this checklist that the state put out that says, this is your checklist for following truth and taxation. And a bunch of towns followed it and then didn't get certified because there was an error, a couple of errors in the checklist. And and so they said, well, it's your job to follow the law, not the checklist. And everybody was like, but you gave us the checklist. So anyway, Utah League of Cities and Towns is working with them this year to try to make sure that checklist is very accurate. And that meet all the deadlines and all the things. So for example, like you have to, if you're going to go through truth and taxation, you have to notify the state June 1st, I think it is, like right at the beginning of June that you're going to do it. You can back out and not do it later, but you have to, if you're going to do it, you have to at least hit those milestones. And the idea being is you're notifying people early and often that this all is happening. And in talking to the league staff last night, they were like, if you guys are going to do it, we'd like to actually help you and like learn from the process and, really, because, not a lot of small towns have done this recently or not successfully. So here's the stat that stuck with me. I think I got these numbers right, but there were 36 towns in Utah that went through truth and taxation last year, and 24 of them failed to get certified.
Well,
And that would tell me too, that probably a lot are trying again this year, and so we probably have that support as everyone is kind of going through this, making sure things are accurate.
So that was part of what they did in the legislative session. They were trying to make it clearer, maybe not easier, but clearer. Here's the, we're not moving the posts on you in the game, like here's what you have to do. In my look at it, I feel like it's like if you can follow directions and we can stay on track, it shouldn't be that crazy hard. But
So in doing this process, it's not like they're coming down and doing new assessments on each property and determining whether,
So
because
we're still on San Juan County's list to do, to have the assessor's office look at properties. However, this would not impact how frequent or when they would come down. I do know we are on their list. They've gone around the county, they've done some more. But just us going through this process will not automatically generate that from the county side. And I don't think we can direct them to either.
no, I was actually sat at the table with the guy the county hired to help them with these assessed values. I guess they have a big problem where like, there's a lot of houses where on the records at the county, it's a 2,000 square foot house, but it's really a 3,500 square foot house. And therefore it's being way undercharged or whatever. But that's a separate deal that has nothing to do with truth or taxation. It's like whatever the county has on the books for the valuation of your house, that's what will apply. And then if that changes the next year, this rate applies to that, but they're two totally separate processes.
I just don't want us to get strapped with, okay, Bluff decided to do truth and taxation, and now not only are my town taxes going up, but my county taxes are going through the roof.
So you've got an interesting one too, because, the county would go off of truth and taxation as well. And it's my understanding that they have not done truth and taxation anytime recently either.
No,
And
but
so,
we did do a big reassessment.
Yeah, the
3 years ago.
reassessment, but what I'm saying is they're totally separate. And if they happen to coincide in a year, that would stink for us because people would not be able to deconflate them, but they are legally separate. And regardless if we don't do this for 10 years, eventually that's gonna happen to us. Like eventually they're gonna get down here and they're gonna go through everybody's houses. And if you got a 3,000 square foot house and you're paying for a 2,000
Yeah.
square foot house, sorry, you're gonna start paying for a
Yeah.
3,000 square foot house.
No, and I'm not against doing this because as I stated last year, I think it's better to do it in smaller increments than to wait in 30 years after you've built a project, all of a sudden come down and do a new assessment on it, and now your tax bill is just increased by, what was the largest one? 900%, I believe, when they did it a few years ago, which is, I mean, to get that bill from, I got this bill at the end of first part of November and it's due by January, whatever the process was, I mean, that was devastating to a lot of people.
Their
I-
overall tax bill went up 900%.
Because it hasn't been addressed for how many years, and I don't wanna see us fall into that trap. Everybody knows that prices increase and things cost more money and things like that, and I feel like if we can do more gentle increments, then we're better off, but I don't think we can just ignore it.
So while we're talking taxes in general, like, are there other areas we could look at taxing outside of property tax that we're allowed to look at, or is it just property tax that we can adjust?
So, I've been thinking about this is like, what other places, what other levers do we have? There aren't a lot of other options for the towns that we haven't already taken advantage of. Like we already took the 1% sales tax for resort town, and that's a good chunk of our revenue. There's the problem with a lot of the other ones that we could deal with is that they're not gonna raise much money for us. So like a zoo, arts and parks is a sales tax you could levy. But the amount that you can levy is so small that it just wouldn't generate very much money. There's a couple of, there's some other things like we don't have a lot of fees. So like there are some fees that we could levy, but they have to be tied to a service. So like you could have a trash fee, but then you gotta provide a trash service, right? Or, like you could have a recycling fee. And then it has to be reasonably tied to what the recycling is. So I think those are things that we could consider if those are things that we want, paths we wanted to go down. But they wouldn't provide the flexible money. The thing about property taxes is it's just a general fund, so you can decide what to use it for versus a fee as tied to a very specific service. But that really the Zoo Arts and Parks one is the only one that I've seen that like, it's like we haven't really done. And then some of the fees. Any other questions, thoughts on that? We're obviously not voting on it or anything, but does anybody have big heartburn about moving in this direction? Cause I think if we do move in this direction, it's kind of like, especially for me and Aaron, but Aaron in particular, like we do have to get on our game with like this truth and taxation process and work with the county. I'm going to League of Cities and Towns next week and they have a whole session of training on this truth and taxation since it's a big thing in Utah and being changed right now. So I'll go and take as much notes as I can. That sort of thing.
So if I understand it correctly, we won't have any idea when the properties and businesses will be reassessed. They're in the process of doing it in some places, but we won't have too much notice.
Bluff just got hit. Well, I know commercial at least got reassessed. I believe it was 3 years ago.
Say, since I'll be in contact with them going through this process, I can ask, I know they have like a rolling list. And they've got like some proposed timelines of like, we're gonna do this area this year and this area this year. I had heard that they were moving a little faster than they thought they would. But I'll see if I can get some more information on that before the next meeting.
And so they don't necessarily have a set schedule of like certain. Like they have to reassess areas in a certain time frame. It's
Oh,
just.
they do, and that's part of why they hired these folks, is they're way behind. And like their records are way off of what is reality in a lot of places. So like the guy that's doing this for the county was telling me like he was seeing properties that, maybe were built in the 1950s. And like whatever the square footage was in the 1950s is still what's in the system, but they've like doubled the size of the house since then and nothing was ever changed. Or, for businesses like that, where it's like,
Right.
The hotel was built and it was a 6-room hotel. Now it's a 50-room hotel, but it's still taxed as a 6-room hotel. So the state actually is like really concerned and wanting to work with the county to get things updated. Cause you could tell it's not, it's not equitable to people if, some people are paying.
You got new
what they really
hotels.
should do and
Yeah.
someone's not.
Yeah.
But I think that's a good question for us to ask, is just like, timing on that. Okay, we can roll through a lot of these, more quickly. Maybe I'll let you, jump in from here, Aaron, and I'll chime in as.
So I would say, a lot of the stuff that we're talking about would be very similar to Michael's wish list. These are things that like, we both think would be very beneficial. But we've got to look at the budget as a whole. So other personnel considerations, we already talked about that emergency services position. I'm also proposing adding a part-time minute taker, who could also potentially double as like a document specialist to help us with ADA compliance, for next year's deadline, for website stuff. I think one of the biggest bandwidth pulls from Leah and I are minutes for town council and planning and zoning respectively. And so that's one that we're interested in proposing. Also would like to propose providing full-time staff with health insurance and retirement benefits. And then a potential contract position that we're interested in would be like a maintenance position that could help with facilities, roads, airport mowing, really kind of everywhere. And the recommendation would be to have these as like a 1099, because the hope would be that they would have like their own equipment and everything. And so, thinking potentially we have, 20 to 30 hours of work per month for this type of need.
If you don't mind going back, I'm gonna chime in a little bit here. This is one that I actually really feel strongly about, kind of going back to our values, like what do we value as a town? And I think one of the things we really ought to value is our team and our staff that we have. And it just feels like after 8 years having a town, it makes sense for us to have professional staff that have health benefits, and access to a retirement account. It just feels like a really important step for us to take as a council to show the value that we put in our staff. Aaron, I think we talked about this, but the health insurance would be for full-time folks, but the retirement would be available for part-time folks too.
I think we can do that. We have to, there's some stuff with URS, but yeah, I think that's right, that we can find ways to get.
So the idea would be a retirement where the town provides a contribution to a 401k that then the employee needs to match to get it. So it'd be like a matching type situation. But it would allow folks also to theoretically accrue some credit in the Utah Retirement Services System, which could be potentially valuable for employees down the road, especially if we retain them, which is what we hope to do. So I just wanted to add a little bit on that. I think the note taker is in that same realm. It's like allowing our full-time staff to really lean into what they're good at instead of less, more administrative things like note taking. And then I think the maintenance position could also give us just a lot of availability, where if it's a small road thing that we can take care of with this contract, if it's putting in a sign or something, we don't have to go out to bid and do this whole thing. It's just like, okay, we've got somebody on contract that's got some equipment, and whoever it may be, but they've got access to equipment, they've got some skills. They're not gonna be able to do everything. We've got some complex electrical thing. We're still gonna need to go out for contract on that. But it could allow us probably to get a lot done for not that much money. It's kind of that.
Well, especially with the addition of that, with the brick, with 2 facilities, having someone full-time for maintenance would be.
Yeah, and I just think of, I was out at the airport with Jim Hook, and like, God bless his soul, he's been personally mowing the airport for years, but like, how much longer can we expect, him to mow the airport, and it's like, oh, maybe it's only a couple of days a year, but it's still like, something that needs to get done. And so I think not relying on the goodwill of our neighbors completely, we'll always need some of that, it'd be great to have that, contracted, so. Okay, anything on these personnel considerations, questions? One thing on the benefits is that, we're not just gonna go out into the marketplace and like, the state does have a way for us to pool in with the rest of the state, public. So it's not crazy hard to do, it's just we have to commit the funds to do it.
So some additional projects that would just kind of fall under general operations, general fund. Potential proposed increase to funding for the business owners of Bluff. This year, $10,000 was contributed, or up to $10,000. Proposing to continue to increase that for advertising and marketing to the area, since the business owners are, the major contributor to our revenue source in terms of tax dollars, TOT, and resort. Josh, you want to talk a little bit about the wayfinding project and potential dark sky program?
Yeah. So the wayfinding project was an idea brought to my attention by the business owners, that we could probably get some county money for it as well, but it would cost, we're just totally estimating it'd be $10,000 to $15,000, but the kind of sort of thing, you turn off the highway and it points the way to the local businesses, to the fort, to the community center. A friendly way to get people around town. And, you know, we all probably have been around and you just see people kind of randomly driving around town. And they don't know where they're going. It would be a way to hopefully keep more people in town and have a nice, friendly, directional, wayfinding system. You know, the money, it sounds like a lot of money, but like somebody has to come up with what the signs are, where they go do the design, work with the business and then order the signs and put them in. It may end up being a little bit less than that, but it's something that the business owners thought would be valuable. And seems like, you know, a kind of a one-time investment that will have a long time benefit.
They can also be very, very individualized, you know, and it's not necessarily the Todd's Blue signs. You can, you know, I've been to towns that have like wagon wheels and they have, you know, just, you can really personalize it and make it kind of your own, not have to be as generic. And it really does help visitors find where they need to go.
Yeah, some character, yeah, it's definitely not one of those like, yeah, green or blue
Yeah,
street signs.
yeah,
It could be
exactly.
something valuable and fun. The dark sky program idea, and this is something I want to iterate some more with Sarah Barak in brainstorming, but the initial idea is we've got this dark sky ordinance and you know, we don't really want to approach this with a stick sort of mentality, be like, you're out of compliance with dark sky, you need to get in. We want to try to provide resources to help people get there, you know, what they can practically do. Maybe there's a small grant program where we, you know, if people are willing to put certain money in, we can, you know, provide a small match to it. Have a technical assistance, a night where people could come and learn from an expert about it. So basically putting a small investment in to keep us moving toward our dark sky goals in kind of a friendly way where we're providing resources and assistance to people rather than, you know, kind of a carrot and stick approach. It may be we get to a certain point that recalcitrant business owners or homeowners that don't want to meet our requirements and we got to think about enforcement. But it feels like to me, we're so early on in our journey that a lot of people just don't know what to do. They don't know what they could do and how maybe even easy it might be to make small changes that would help. So that's kind of the idea of that, is to keep moving dark sky along in a friendly way, but with some resources for the public and businesses.
Think with the stuff that the Beak has acquired, I feel like we have already moved leaps and bounds with our dark sky education stuff. You know, we have the ambassador program now, we have, you know, we just have access to education and information, and I really feel like, you know, our Star Festival this year got people out and looking up and just, you know, really kind of led to the importance of it. So I'm really happy about this because I do think that the stick approach per se was not successful, and I wish we could have rolled it out a little differently than we did when we initiated our dark sky stuff, because I think everybody in town really could, this is something that we could really be on board with and get behind.
Okay. So the next thing on the agenda, which we're running short on time, so we may spread this out a little bit, but talking about capital projects. We there's a number of capital projects we'll talk about, but there are some that we see, do you mind going back that slide? Sorry.
Say this only is those two.
Yeah, these are two big ones that we're thinking, you know, we have enough capital projects to actually move forward this next year. As opposed to many of the other projects on the list are essentially projects we're saving for. But if we wanted to move some of these forward, we would want to put them in our fiscal 27 budget. So one of the things we've been thinking about is we've got all these solar panels that we had donated and they're just sitting in a shed, not saving anybody any money. And, you know, it could be a while and before we could put them on the brick But it could be the sort of thing, we could put them on this building and start saving money right away. Likely we have enough panels to more than do what we need for this building, and probably have some left over for the other building, although not enough to do the whole other building. But the idea would be to invest the money now to be able to start having the savings that we could get from having solar. The other thing is, as y'all know, we have this generator grant to buy a generator for this building that we need to do some wiring work anyway. And so if we do the wiring work for the generator, that can also benefit the solar at the same time. It's kind of a double duty to invest to put the solar here right away. So this 125K is a very rough number for now. There's a lot of variables that could change that. But, you know, I would hope that it would come in less than that. We've got all the panels bought already. And so it's installation, but you could have it be that we need to do some roof repair to be able to put them on the roof. We definitely have to do some wiring stuff to make it happen. But that's the idea. It's a pretty big project, but if we could make that happen next year, we'd start saving money right away. And then the other one, which is less clear, but as you guys know, Patrick McDermott and team are looking into what we can do on secondary water to advance that project. They've got some ideas that they're actively working on right now, and it kind of as a placeholder, we're thinking of having something around 95K to put toward that project next year. That, you know, is dependent on a number of things happening first. They're gonna test out some hypotheses about it, but since we're at this point in the budget, you know, it'd be nice to have the money to be able to apply toward that work next year. So those are two big capital projects we want to bring forward into next year's budget that we think we have money in the bank for, basically. That was kind of our budget, overall budget discussions. Top line of the big changes, you know, maybe we'll close them.
So in your agenda packet, you do have the Excel file. Draft. Let me get this shared on Zoom as well. So for those of you who have come along with me before, you know, these can get quite lengthy. We are required to have the last 3 years of actuals, so that's why you're gonna see columns B, C, D, and F. And then what you have here is the proposed budget amendment. I have a couple little teeny tiny changes just since we have more updated information. But you're going to want to check out column I. The things that are highlighted in yellow are kind of what we talked over today, or areas that you may want to weigh in on specifically. I do have that note from Linda and have that broken out of EMS fundraiser for revenues. We're seeing, you know, some larger transfers from capital projects to fund those too. And then as we move down, it's separated airport, administration, benefits would fall into there. Right now I have some of Bob has always come under here, as well as like that wayfinding project. I just kind of have it in administration. Emergency services, so that's going to be broken out separately. That has not been broken out separately before, but it's important that we do that if you were to move forward with that truth and taxation that folks could see, you know, line to line where that's coming out. We've got roads. I did update with Michael's stuff this afternoon, but as I called out, we're just we need a little bit more revenues to meet the wish list or dial back on the wish list a little bit. Parks and facilities, including that dark skies project. Then we could start seeing those capital improvements at the Bluff Community Center. Total parks there. Cemeteries broken out separately. And then once we dial in as to exactly what we want to see where, then we can get to the total transfers. This expenditures number, is gonna not quite be right yet. So I need you all, to, provide feedback as to, yes, we're aligned with, the stuff we shared today. If you have additional things that you want to add, and then kind of go through that prioritization. So with the exception of Michael's, go back up here, sorry, gonna make you dizzy. So, to the roads department, if we had his entire wish list, would need about $25,000 more in revenue from some kind of funding. And then currently, I have, and I put in some, I was doing some midnight adjustments last night. But if we had some of the lower numbers, so on the slideshow, it said like 10 to 15,000 or something like that. I have some of the lower numbers in there, and we're still about $3,700 short. $3,700, not a big deal, not super worried about it. But now is a good time to talk about, is there something you feel really strongly about? Is there something we missed? If there's something that you're like, yes, absolutely get that in the budget. Here are some other things that I don't care as much about. I do want to note from a revenue standpoint, the hope is by next week for a final proposed budget that like these numbers are even tightened up in the proposed budget amendment. But what I am drafting for 2027 is a little, I don't want to say it's higher. The real increase would be those property taxes there, but it's kind of in line with what our projections are, with maybe just like a little bump in some areas to some taxes. The hope would be for H, like this is very conservative because we're almost at the end of the year. I think 2027 is still conservative, but it's not as tight on the purse strings. So I would be a little hesitant to just say, oh yeah, to cover the $4,000 deficit, we'll just increase this to $15,000. Like I don't want to do that right now, unless you have data that would, just point me in the right direction and data say, yeah, we should increase this. I'd say I is still relatively conservative. I would guess by the time that we would be looking at a potential budget amendment next year, we'd be seeing something similar to what we're seeing this year, where taxes are actually, for sales taxes, are actually going to be coming in ideally far above my projections. But again, try to budget that conservatively and go from there.
Okay, a lot of numbers.
A lot of numbers. If you tell me the area, then I will find it and we can make adjustments. You just gotta give me high big categories and I can go and tell you where we're at.
Yeah, so just to put an exclamation point on what she said, we're bringing some ideas forward to you. You guys haven't had that much chance to think of it yet. We're just starting this process. So as you're thinking about it, you're like, what about this? Or where is that in the budget? That's what we want to hear back from you. Feel free to reach out to either of us, or obviously we're gonna have other meetings on this, bring forward in other meetings. If you have ideas or thoughts now, great.
Can we get a copy of that presentation of the slides in
Yes.
the packet?
I'll save it in document.
Thank you.
I don't wanna like freak people out. It had to be promised. Yeah,
Talked about it, it'd be great, thank you.
of course.
One thought that I have is, with the road stuff thing, roads are super important and that we should maintain them and keep doing what we're doing. But I wonder if we should just kind of stick with where we are without trying to make up that additional 25 for this year, because we've got that match. My thought with that just being, like Michael said, those were estimates too, like some of those numbers could be much more, so we might end up needing to find, like if we were trying to get all of that work done, we may need to find quite a bit. I mean, it could be less as well, but those were estimates, and maybe some of those projects we get into them and it might take more, so I don't know. That was kind of one of the things I'm thinking about, is maybe I don't know, 'cause it sounds like we've taken care of a lot of the critical stuff. And I mean, all of the other things that you talked about definitely need to be done, but I don't know. Maybe we focus the money that we have. Well, and I guess we don't even know if we're gonna get that full match though either,
So
right?
they're usually pretty good, like if they give the commitment of, hey, you've got $83,000 for next year, they're pretty good at that. I will say, there was an individual who approached me at the event last night, who sits on that board, and expressed some concerns with things he's heard about Bluff's values regarding, um, uh, being opposed to oil and gas, and indicating that, you know, funding for these matching funds are coming through oil and gas. And so therefore, you know, they are a little hesitant to continue to give Bluff money. I would say the 83,000, Michael's got a pretty good confirmation, like that was approved in a notice meeting. I was a little bit surprised, well, I was not surprised by the comments. It was an interesting comment though, and I think, you know, speaks into the higher discussions of you as a council when we talk about potentially looking at like CIB board, or CIB funds, just knowing that, you know, anytime that we're, you know, trying to work intergovernmentally, there are higher powers at play as opposed to just this money is available and, you know, it should be distributed to the municipalities and to the county. But there are definitely biases that are coming out. And so Michael's done a fabulous job. I mean, $110,000 this year, 83 next year, like that's great. But I was a little concerned with that statement. So I think years to come, we should really.
I wish I'd
get
been,
engaged.
I wish I'd been there for that comment
Me
because
too.
I feel like, you know, there's a difference between wanting, you know, like having a concern about fracking, you know, around our aquifer and being supportive of oil and gas. I mean, there are no communities north of you whose fire department regularly responds to the oil field the way the Bluff Fire Department does. You know, like I've personally been on calls to the fire department dozens of times while being a firefighter here. And we provide a lot of service and a lot of support for the oil field, that's right in our backyard. That's very different from, you know, kind of having some legitimate concerns about fracking in where our aquifer is. And so, you know, I think we need people that can say, hey, look, we go to calls on the reservation, we go to calls in the oil field. We are supportive of having safety, but we're also impacted. So, you know, we're a team player here, but like, you know, we're out there. We're literally responding to those calls as a fire department.
There's like just a basic First Amendment right kind of issue with you don't get targeted for if your citizens don't get targeted for expressing their First Amendment rights, like that shouldn't come into your budget decisions. Seems, you know, unconstitutional flatly, but I'm just saying, like, even before even getting there, it shouldn't be the way it's being done. Like, and definitely surprising, well, and unsurprising that it would be said out loud. Like, that's just a bummer, but I guess I'm glad they said it. But people should have a right to speak freely without repercussions, and those repercussions.
Yeah.
So if we are thinking about developing our own EMS person, does that affect the way that we've got our workaround now so that our ambulance can transport again? Is that going to jeopardize that? Because
So first of all, I want to be clear, that proposal is not EMS. It's
Okay.
emergency services,
okay,
but not emergency medical services. So it would be a support to our town, helping EMS and fire, with administrative recruitment, those sort of things. It's quite frankly, a small investment to support that, to kind of show our investment in those services.
Mhm.
But it is not like us having our own EMS. It's certainly us not having our own fire department. Those are ongoing conversations we're gonna have to have with the county. This is us just stepping up to say, hey, we're gonna continue to increase our investment. And particularly, there are some things that the state is making us do, like this defensible space, wildland, urban interface stuff that we're legally required to do now as a town, and we need to make some investments in. So again, I want to kind of separate it from some bigger discussions about the future of EMS. Like we mentioned in the previous, did we mention in the previous meeting, the whole EMS thing?
No, so I did wanna hit on
Okay.
that. So Jeremy Hogard had stopped in and spoken with me about a county initiative. I want to invite him, we want to invite him to hopefully come next week, if not the first meeting in May.
Not
It's-
next week.
Oh, it is the first meeting in May.
Yeah.
Yep, you're right.
Because you guys are gonna be gone. or-
That's right. Yeah, next week's weird. You three are critical. Cause you're traveling.
Well, I was planning on.
If you're attending virtually, that's still good. You're still critical. So first meeting in
Not
May.
missed the meeting.
No, first meeting in May, Jeremy Hogard, trying to invite him because the county, through the county, are proposing a 1% sales tax to support EMS specifically. And that one is EMS specifically. And the benefit, without getting too far in the weeds, because we will have a whole conversation, the benefit is originally the county had come to the town indicating that to make up for their shortfall, because you don't make money doing EMS anywhere, top to bottom. It is a money losing adventure. But they had originally approached the municipalities and said, we're gonna need you to chip in to the county. For Bluff, that could have looked like 30, 40, 50, $60,000 annually, paying the county to help continue to run EMS. With this sales tax, if it was to go through, this would be a ballot initiative. The municipality, that discussion would not be on the table anymore. And so it's important for you all, for the public to understand that they're proposing, what it would go to, and be able to ask questions. So I'll invite him in. So emergency services is a big discussion across the board. And clearly, from our level the whole way up, we're trying to figure out ways to stop the hemorrhaging.
So that EMS thing, and I'm just learning about it too, but that's why we want Jeremy to come talk to us about it. That's a tax that like the county could levy, but we couldn't, that extra 1% sales tax for EMS. But if that were to pass, it would definitely take some pressure off the EMS system. Now that again, it's that in and of itself. I don't think Jeremy's gonna come in and promise that we're gonna have 10 EMPs at our fire station.
I'm actually thrilled to hear about that. That wasn't the workaround what I was thinking of. I don't know if you guys are aware, but our ambulance can transport again because they're now running them as a landing ambulance station in Bluff. So that helped us get around the numbers. Because I mean, I've lived here for a long time. And I can think of one year that we might have had the amount of people that he said we were gonna be required to be able to transport patients in. And.
It's gonna be tough for us to ever have that many folks stationed here, but we can't have more than we currently do. And I'm personally a little responsible for the current number because I'm letting my EMS license expire because I just can't do it all. But yeah, so I think there's some positive things happening with regard to EMS, but this investment would be kind of separate of what all happens on that. But hopefully a support for us. And I also hope, and I've not yet talked to Mac McDonald specifically about fire and EMS, but as seen as an olive branch, as like, hey, we're willing to make investments. We're not trying to free ride on the county. We're willing to make investments, even proactive investments like this. And we want to be a team player in all of this. So yeah, good clarification. And to your point about the roads, Spencer, I'm really inclined to agree with you. That, roads is kind of like, there's an infinite amount of work to do. I mean, it's 3 point something million, but that feels like infinite to me. And like, let's bite off what we have budget to bite off. And if we end up having more revenues come in, or we are able to get more match, then we can invest more. But like, it didn't seem like there was any make or break 20,000 in there, that if like we didn't do that 20,000, we'd be SOL. Like,
Right, that was my thought, was like, with that money, we could definitely do some, whatever critical things pop up this year and some other projects.
yeah,
With all the work we did this year, like,
so right there, you would have, you know, the shortfall will be covered, you know what I mean?
And I can just work with them to, and again, like, I care less about the individuals, because we definitely see bleed over from like maintenance to improvements to supply, you know, all of that. But we'll probably get this down to like the one, I had originally had it about like 176, but we have about 196,000 in projected revenues. Now, that does not carry over anything into the following year. But we have historically seen kind of that sway with roads. It's kind of a little bit feast or famine. We had been really, really, really low on the expenditures the last few years. This one's been a high expenditure year, but look at all the great work that's happening. Probably we'd see the same next year. And then we might need to save up a little bit more, or approach you know, other funding opportunities, or seek some grants.
Okay, that budget discussion took a little longer than we thought. What I might take a little bit of, executive privilege as mayor is to suggest that this next capital improvement plan discussion, we just barely touch it. So we don't, because it's a lot more numbers, and we've been talking a lot more numbers. It's not urgent that we talk about it today. Maybe I'll just highlight a couple of things for y'all to be thinking about, and then we'll re-agenda this for a future meeting. What we're talking about, there's two main issues with capital projects. And I'm gonna get some clarification when I meet with Utah League of Cities and Towns next week. But we have this list of capital improvement projects, and we have to have a list of projects in order to have a capital improvement fund, which we do have as a town. As a town, we've never actually allocated that fund, so it's essentially just a big pot of money we can use for capital improvement projects. But we don't really have, we've saved up this much for this project and this much for this project, but we don't really know where we're at with any project. So what we've talked about and what we're thinking about doing is moving to having our fund be allocated. And there's nothing that keeps us from moving things around if we change our priorities or a new project comes up, but go ahead and allocating the fund. So Aaron and I have gone through some back and forth in creating, again, just a straw proposal for how we might allocate the funds that we have going forward. Don't want to get into that tonight because it's kind of a lot. We'll get into it, but so I'll encourage you guys to look at it. But the one big thing I'd ask you to think about is, are there capital improvement projects that you can think of that we ought to be saving up for that are not on this list? So there's some things on here that we, like the playground that is almost done. We're going to use a little bit of capital improvement projects. That one we can kind of cross off. But is there another big project that isn't on our radar or wasn't on the previous council's radar that we ought to be saving for? We ought to be thinking ahead for. And if there's something missing off the list, we can add that to the list. And once we have the list, we can decide of our current fund, how much do we kind of have saved up for X project? And once we get to full funding for the project, do we want to go ahead and do it, or we want to keep waiting to get a grant, a grant or something? So obviously the brick project, it's a huge project. It's like a $3 million project. We don't have $3 million of capital improvement funds. We're just not going to do that unless we get some more grants. We could make some investments along the way, right? But we're going to kind of wait until we get grant money for some of these. But there's some smaller ones, just like we might as well go ahead and do it. As an example, the airport repaving project, the state's going to give us like $2 million if we can come up with 200,000. So if we can start saving for it or apply for grants or that sort of thing for it, that's great. But it's not for a few years down the road. It's not until 2029. So I guess that's the big ask, is to be thinking about what's missing. And then of these, which are our highest priorities that we want to be allocating some funds to. And we just took a first shot at allocating the current pot of money that we have saved up, which is 583,000. Basically, we have $583,000 in the bank that we can put toward capital projects. We could blow it all on one project. Or we can, kind of allocate it across and be kind of saving up the bank. Does that, you feel like that's yeah, Alec, does that make sense?
Yeah.
So without going through the list, what do you think about our allocations and stuff tonight, which could take a lot of time? We'll come back to this, but with kind of the charge to be thinking about what should we be saving for that we don't? And I will say there is one kind of technical question that I'll have answered early next week is how specific does the project have to be? So can it be, right now you'll see in there, we have parks, trails and facilities. That's not the such and such trail, right? It's kind of like a bucket for parks, trails and facilities. And there's a little bit of a question of like, can we be that vague or do you actually have to have a very specific project in mind? Do you have to have this road or this trail or this park? And we'll get that answered by early next week. I'd love it if we can kind of have these more like buckets and then you can kind of use it as it comes.
Yeah. Sounds good.
Well, and in this vein, looking at it, I mean, we're almost done with the playground. Cemetery is essentially done. Right?
Well, it's gonna be an ongoing project, but yeah,
But I mean, our big
The spend,
spend
yeah.
is done. I mean, to me, that's more of a maintenance person or
Yeah.
something to that effect.
yeah.
The brick, of course, is nowhere near being done. Generator is, sounds like almost done, possibly, if we choose to go
Yeah,
the solar direction. I think that's kind of why we chose to mark them as high. Isn't it, Brett, when we worked on this last, I mean, they were ones that we felt like were in our wheelhouse to knock off, just basically, Josh, like you said, it's like, okay, here's this small project, can we go for this right now, Playground came up, and we got grant opportunity, can we do it?
yeah, so, I've kind of racked my brain, there's no, big thing, I mean, the other thing, Jen, that I thought of the other day after texting with you about the Navajo Fair
Yeah,
would be, is there a place where we could do a fairground type project? And like, like, I can't think of where it is, but that could be a capital improvement project that you could start saving for. That was the only thing that it feels a little too preliminary to me to put on the capital improvements list, but we could, I mean, nothing stops us from putting
right,
something.
yeah,
like
just
that.
because it's on the list doesn't mean that it's,
Gonna happen.
could be on the list for 2035.
Yeah. But there's things like that. What are the ultimate wish lists for Bluff that are capital improvements that we may want to save? And we can just decide if we want to put them on the list or not. Just so you guys know, we were texting about this idea of bringing back the Utah Navajo Fair and maybe in a small scale, maybe it's not the full rodeo, but it's powwow or whatever. And, could we as a town work with our neighbors to maybe bring that back? So just some early conversations about that.
And, I mean, we're only, it certainly wouldn't, I don't want anybody to freak out, oh, God, the town of Bluff is gonna take off. I mean, when we hosted, I think hosting the fair is a better way to put it.
Yeah.
Because in the past, yes, they used San Juan County EMS and used our grounds, but the BSA certainly did not do the planning and the everything else that went along with the fair. It was just, they were using ours, we were hosting.
Yeah, maybe we host a powwow here on these grounds or
Yeah.
something, but we would be, or if it makes sense for,
Yeah,
the 7 white folks here that organize the Navajo Fair, but could we support it and say that we think it's valuable?
evaluate it,
Yeah, that would be great.
Evaluate, that's a good way to put it.
Okay, well, do we wanna is the ADA compliance quick to tackle? Is it kind of in the budget with the note taker thing? What do you,
I would say if it's in the budget with the no taker thing, I think we would probably have a pretty good runway with it. Yeah, if you guys were comfortable with the thought of having an additional part-time employee. Who kind of serve both purposes, I think that would be great. And I do think that the skills required for the minute note taker position would align closely with what we would need for someone to kind of do the raw. Okay, we're transforming this document into ADA accessible, so I think that would be good. Unless you feel very strongly that you want to go get a third party, in which case we'll try again,
No.
like, okay.
I think that was confusing the first reading.
Okay,
all right, well, that'll be our rough plan then. Put it in the budget. Try to get a note taker.
cool, I appreciate it.
Okay. Any other items? Anything else to bring up for folks that you can think of? All right, well, appreciate y'all hanging with us on the numbers discussion. We'll consider ourselves adjourned.
Just if we're still online, anybody out there, there is dark sky ambassador stuff happening here tonight at 9 o'clock unless it's completely cloudy, I think. But ooh, dark sky week, International Dark Sky Week.
Excellent. 5:31 PM, turning off the recorder.